What's up, guys? I just bought this junk and it has a turbo on it.
Yeah,
I don't know what it does. It makes noises and it spins every gear, and I cry when I drive it.
I cry when VR6 turbos decide to die.
That's literally exactly what happened. Because we're going to be filming the process of removing
the transmission
to do timing guides and chains, because I went to start this up and it decided, hey, you're not doing any of that today, and it broke. So this is an HPA setup from the 2000s, early 2000s.
in combination with HGP
That's
turbo.
back when they were doing all that stuff. It's a really OG kit. I originally bought this car expecting it to be all right, and it ran a little bit. Insert clips of it running a little bit. And then it broke. So that's what we're going to be doing today and probably over the next couple of days.
So, because this car is turbo, it's actually going to be a little bit easier for us to do the timing chains and guides on it, because the stock intake manifold is no longer there. We've got a short runner, so that saves us like 2 hours of work or something. So we're going to get started by pulling the front end off and taking the airbox out and the battery out, and we're going to film that all now. So before we tear this whole thing apart, I just want to talk about it a little bit. It's a Super OG HPA / HGP turbo kit. It's a GT30 ball bearing turbo, and it's got internal wastegate over here. As you can see,
HGP calls it an R30, which is funny. But it's supposedly got bigger hot side than factory. I've heard it was engineered to be perfect for the VR and all that shit. Like, there's hardly any spec information, like AR size and stuff. And all there is just, yeah, it was made by them and it's different. So it's a hybrid GT30. It's pretty much all we know about it.
Yeah, so, and as you can see, it's soaked in oil and whatever the crap else is on there. But it's pretty interesting. Looks like there's some sort of EGT probe there. I don't know how they wired that up to the ECU, but that's kind of interesting. And then as you can see here, like, the oil feed just goes straight over the valve cover. Kind of unusual for HPA. What'll be interesting too is to see where the oil feed actually comes off of. Did they weld an AN fitting on the oil filter housing, or did they make their own oil filter housing? So we're going to look into that. This car actually has dual side mount intercoolers from the Audi TT, and they're both beefed up, coupled with a bunch of custom piping. This is actually a very special manifold because it was designed for the 2.8. The casting is for 2.8 ports, as well as the exhaust manifold. It's for specifically a 2.8 liter 24 valve with a T3 flange on it that fits that R30 branded turbo. We're also using
RS4 MAF.
RS4 MAF. So they did that so that they could retain the stock airbox, which is kind of neat. And then they just use a little coupler adapter to go to the intake piping. And yeah, everything's done pretty nicely. The fuel setup is a little bit wacky. I'll talk about that more in a second.
A little bit wacky.
But yeah, also this valve cover was powder coated black, which is cool. However, they didn't actually smooth it down, so you can see a lot of the casting bumps in the job. So maybe we'll redo that in the future. Some of it's actually coming off over here.
You can see,
and then,
this is the worst scenario.
Yeah, obviously, like, a lot of it's chipped off the intake manifold, so may end up redoing that later.
You can show this is probably about 12 years of whatever.
Yeah, so this is a funny story here. This mark actually comes from the cylinder head. It doesn't come from the exhaust manifold. The previous owner, or two previous owners ago, he thought, I guess, that the exhaust manifold wasn't sealing against the cylinder head, or the gasket had blown or something. So he brought it back to HPA, and he had HPA remachine the exhaust manifolds. He remachined the turbo flange and the downpipe and did all new gaskets, and I guess it still occurred. And it turned out that right down here, there's this little plug in the cylinder head, and it's actually for exhaust gas recirculation system, where it routes exhaust gases in the cylinder head to help the motor warm up. And this little cap here, it's like a little freeze pop. It popped out, and the exhaust ports from the manifold pushed exhaust through this. Obviously it did that, so we'll clean that up at some point. Now when we bought this car, it had a bunch of timing codes, or it had one major timing code. It was some sort of intake correlation code. They said that it had been there for a long time, but we looked back at some forum posts of this car, and it wasn't always there. So that was like the first tip off of the timing.
Actually, it specifically said when they originally posted this car for sale in 2005, no check engine lights, no CEL.
Yeah, so this car didn't have any check engine light, and when we got it, it was on, and it was explained that it had been there for a while, and it was just part of the head spacer issue. So exactly 209,279 kilometers. So we drove it home, and we parked it back here, and 2 weeks later, he goes to start it up, and it skipped timing.
Right so there. I heard the infamous marbles, which may be a timing, or probably is the guide, which is probably just laying down at the bottom of everything right now.
I pulled up with VACCOM and looked at the codes, and there was a correlation from camshaft position sensor and crankshaft position sensor. So that means that the timing is off, and the upper guides probably have failed as a result. So I want to really quickly get back to how the fuel setup is in this car. So we've got an inline filter up here, and then the pump has actually taken the place of the factory fuel filter. The fuel pump on this car is really loud. So you can probably hear that, pretty loud. When it's actually on and running, it sounds like... That's something that we're definitely going to address in the future, but right now we just want to get the timing chains guides replaced. So yeah, as far as we know, it's running the original in-tank fuel pump.
Which is kind of crazy that it's made this far.
It is. I mean, there are receipts that are missing from the car. This car actually has Raxels in it. Let's just go over a lot of the weird quirks of this car, like special parts that it has. We got Willwood brakes up in the front. They're pretty old, but they're like 13-inch rotors. Audi TT 10.1-inch vented rear rotors and calipers. This spoiler is pretty OG. As you can see, here's how the paint is holding up. The clear coat is all flaked off the roof. The bumper is kind of special. It's molded. The front valence is molded, kind of weird. The paint's chipping off of it at the front. And then we've got Hella E-Code lights that have glass lenses. This one's been replaced before.
And then it got a chip in it again.
And then as soon as they replaced it, like a couple days later or something like that, they got a chip in it. So
this is why glass lenses are pretty to look at, but not practical at all.
No. So in the interior, it's really OG. They have this, where we've got this Greddy boost controller.
It's sitting on a block of wood that is glued to the steering column, painted black, and then Velcroed.
Yeah, it's pretty jank.
Funny thing happened is this thing has a last boost function. So you can see what last boost, and then you can actually see the max boost that this car ever saw.
Yeah.
The dynoed was 17 pounds, and we've put it to 20 pounds, or the previous owner did, and we ran it at 20. We pressed the max boost that this has ever seen, 30 PSI.
34 actually.
34 PSI.
Which is wicked. I mean, they must have been making a ton of power. 34 pounds. These injectors are only 380 cc. But
a 4-bar.
Yeah, they put a 4-bar in, which we're actually going to take out because we think it's causing some issues. The ECU wasn't originally tuned for 4-bar. So we're going to put a 3-bar in and see how it runs. It does have a little bit of a drivability issue with stalling and such. Man, like they must have run out of fuel at 34 pounds of boost. We don't even know what the compression of the motor is. We're gonna look at that once the chains and guides are finished up. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all with the setup.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. For 12 years, this thing was turbocharged. 12 years. And
more than that.
Actually, yeah, more than that.
Yeah,
actually,
we're looking at nearly 20 years.
Nearly 20 years this thing had a turbo slapped in the back.
It's on SD coilovers as well. That's another thing. It had
to be on KW V3s. They broke probably, and they threw them out.
They threw out KW V3s.
They threw them out.
They're rebuildable. So, oh well, that's a loss.
Yeah.
So another thing is the seat has fallen apart a little bit. It's not super worn on the actual leather, but just the stitching just happened to come apart. Another kind of cool quirk is up here. You've got a Passat auto dimming mirror, which is good. The Jettas and Golfs that had auto dimming mirrors, they normally would fail, and the replacement would be an updated Gentex B5 unit. So that's what we got here now, alongside a W8 dome light. K&N air filter, and they Swiss cheesed the box out. Actually, they cut like the whole bottom end out of it.
Kind of also Swiss cheese the wheel well.
Oh yeah, we've got a little bit of custom air ducting, as you can see there. Kind of hilarious. Whatever works, I guess.
Yeah.
So, as typical sometimes with these older Golfs and Jettas, we have crunched pinch weld syndrome. So jacking this car up, being low as well, is not especially easy.
Car's low, but it's not as low as my bank account.
Yep, that's right. When you own a VR6 Turbo, your bank account will always be lower than your car.
It's a proportional thing.
Jade and I am too familiar with this. So this is cool. Now we can actually see what the twin side mounts look like. I mean, it is a factory Audi TT kind of thing. They're on both sides. This one's a little broken. Oh wow, here's another goodie that we didn't even know existed. It's got like hella dual tone horns that are just kind of mounted on the.
Oh, you remember when we pressed the horn on this car and it was like really dinky?
Yeah.
That's what
that is. That's hilarious. That's so OG, and like you get mega scene points for that back in the day. That's the receipt book. It's pretty big, pretty thick, a lot of history. There's even, stuff on this car that the receipts don't talk about. We thank you for allowing HPA to use your car in the Uber Golf Challenge. Your car will be outfitted with Toyo tires prior to the event, and you will be allowed to keep these after the event. HPA will assume full responsibility for the condition and liability of your vehicle. Should any damage arise to your vehicle while in our care, we will cover 100% of the cost to restore it to its original condition. I will man the wheel on this vehicle for the tests. Sincerely, Marcel Horn. So that's cool.